Greetings, neo-barbarians. It's Alex from Inner War Strength here. Now, today I wanted to talk a little bit about why you should be strong. Please excuse the fact that I'm a little bit congested. I'm still recovering from an illness. It's been pretty cold here the past few days, and it looks like it got to me a little bit. But nonetheless, the war against atrophy still continues. Now, so I believe that it is your duty as a man to be strong. And even if you're not a man, you should still be strong. Now, why is that? Now, for a minute, I want to just quote from one of the Bibles of strength training, starting strength, basic barbell training by the the infamous Mark Rippetoe. Now, a lot has been said about Mark Rippetoe, both good and bad. But one thing that can be said is that there are few people on this earth that know more about strength training than him. And I want to just read the first paragraph of this book, of the introduction, strength, why, and how. So you guys can get a good idea about why you should be strong. Okay, so quote: physical strength is the most important thing in life. This is true whether we want it to be or not. As humanity has developed throughout history, physical strength has become less critical to our daily existence, but no less important to our lives. End quote. Now, before I continue, I just want to say a few things about that. So, what he's saying here is that, physical strength is the most important thing in life because it determines your relationship with your physical environment, right? That's just simply how it is. You want to get out of a chair, you have to, exert force against the chair in order to get out of it because strength is ultimately also, quote from Mark Rippetoe, is the ability to produce force against an external resistance. Now, an external resistance isn't just, a barbell or a sled or a dumbbell or a rope or whatever. It's also an opponent in a boxing ring. It's also, like I said, a chair when you're just getting out of it. Okay. Everything that defines your physical existence is about is about exerting force against an external resistance. Okay. And the next thing he says here about, how humanity has developed throughout history and physical strength has become less important. The reason he says that is because, um, you know, as I always say as well, the Dork Age has made everybody soft. The Dork Age has made us less reliant on our physical capacity and more reliant on other things. So that could be, our intellectual capacity, or, actually nowadays, not even that. Um, but it's made us less reliant on our physical capacity, whereas, in the past, you had to uh, exert force against a plow in order to plow a field, or you had to exert force against um, uh, a what are they called? A scythe, to reap the grain and stuff like that, right? So nowadays, our strength isn't as important. Okay, however, it still determines the quality and the quantity of our time here in these bodies. Okay, so he says our strength, more than any other thing we possess, still determines the quality and quantity of our time here in these bodies. Now, what he's saying here is that there's been plenty of studies that have shown that strength is a very good predictor for longevity. Okay, so if you're weak and frail, your life expectancy is a lot lower than if you're big and strong. Okay, also, if you get into a car accident or you fall down, being weak and frail is more of a liability than being big and strong. Okay, so let's continue. Whereas previously, our physical strength determined how much food we ate and how warm and dry we stayed, it now merely determines how well we function in these new surroundings we have crafted for ourselves as our culture has accumulated. But we are still animals. Our physical existence is, in the final analysis, the only one that actually matters. So, what he's saying here is what I mentioned earlier, that even though our physical strength is less relevant in the way we function through what I call the Dork Age now. Because, like I said, you don't have to plow a field anymore. You don't have to wrestle a pig to the floor and slaughter it to feed your family. You can just, go to the supermarket, and that doesn't require much strength, does it? Right? But nonetheless, our physical existence, in the final analysis, is the only one that actually matters. A weak man, he goes on to say, is not as happy as that same man would be as if he were strong. And that's true. If you're weak, there's all kinds of things that you feel that ail you, right? Now, as you get older, you'll feel, maybe you have a dodgy elbow, or you have a bum knee or something, or, you know, you just have a bad back, all right? And anyone over 30 is going to have a bad back at some point or another. It's just how it is. But being weak and having, a bum knee or a bad shoulder or a bad back is a whole other ball game than being strong and having a bad back. All right. So that's something you should keep in mind. The reality is offensive to some people, he says, who would like the intellectual or the spiritual to take precedence. Now, this is very interesting too, because I think there's a tendency in our culture, in the Dork Age, to fetishize um, the maybe not so much the intellectual anymore, but there's definitely a worship of science and scientism, right? I'm sure you've heard that term before. So we have elevated scientists, let's say, to what were previously the position of priests. Okay. Um, and again, what he's saying here is that the reality is offensive to some people who would like the intellectual or spiritual to take precedence, right? Because being an intellectual is, I'm not saying it's difficult, like it's difficult to study and it's difficult to earn a credential and earn a qualification, right? Maybe it was harder in the past, but that's another topic for discussion. But and maybe we'd like to think that those things are more valuable than physical strength. But I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. And he finishes the paragraph by saying, "It is instructive to see what happens to these very people." He means some people who would prefer the intellectual and the spiritual to take precedence over the physical. It is instructive to see what happens to these very people as their squat strength goes up. Right. And I can tell you something as well from my own experience. As someone who has previously considered myself more, fairly spiritual, I used to meditate I would meditate every day, actually, and work on that side of myself. But when I started strength training, I no longer felt the need to meditate. Now, that's not to say that my spirituality is kind of diminished or anything like that. And that's not to say that I, place materialism over spirituality. But strength training is, in its way, um, its own kind of spirituality, right? So maybe that's a topic for another video. But what I would say is that strength training definitely has a spirit, okay, and there's definitely something that you can get from it, which borders on a meditative state, okay. There's the level of focus that you need to have under the bar um, can very often, be compared to a meditative state, because you shut everything off under the bar and you get in the zone and you don't think about anything else. So, yeah, there's something to be said for that for sure. But beyond these, beyond the importance of strength for strength's sake and how it defines your physical relationship with the world, I will also say that as a man, it is your duty to be strong. Okay. Because as a man, if you are strong, you are more useful. You are literally more useful by definition. Okay. What do I mean by that? I'll give you some very easy, concrete examples. Let's say you go to the supermarket with your wife, all right? And you have like 8 bags of groceries that you need to unload from the car, right? You're a lot more useful if you can unload those groceries without any problems. Okay. And if you can unload those groceries quickly. Another example, let's say your wife is going to inevitably want to move some furniture in the house, and guess who's going to do it? It's going to be you. All right. So moving that furniture, or even just moving house, because you're going to move house in your life, at some point or another during your life, you know, uh, moving all that furniture and boxes and all that stuff. What do you think is going to be? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's going to be easier if you're weak? Do you think it's going to be, you know, just the same experience as if you were weak? No, it's infinitely easier when you're strong. Infinitely easier. Okay. If you have children, all right, you need to be strong for your children. You need to be strong so you can carry them, literally carry them. All right, because your kid is going to want to be carried. All right, and believe me, there's no, there's no greater, there's no greater joy than picking up your kid and hearing them laugh and all of that. But anyway, it is your duty as a man to be strong because people will depend on you. All right, and you will be more dependable if you are strong. Right, if you're weak and you fold, no one's gonna be able to depend on you. All right, so that's why you should be strong. Let me know in the comments if you have any other reasons, if you can think of any other reasons why you want to be strong. um, but I'll also say one thing: once you do get strong, you realize, why would you want to be anything other than that? Why would you not want to be strong? How could you? I'm at a point where I can't even fathom not being strong. And I'm not saying like I'm the strongest guy. I'm not. I'm not strong. Uh, on an international powerlifting level or whatever, right? But compared to the average Joe, yeah, I'm pretty fucking strong. Okay, and I wouldn't have it any other way, and I wouldn't be able to fathom my life not being like that, right? And I don't understand why anyone would accept from themselves, anyone would let themselves not be strong. I really don't get it. um, once you taste, once you taste the iron, that's it. That's it. There's no going back. All right. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any other reasons why you could think of to be strong, other than from the fact that strength itself, um, is an end. It's in itself, right? Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. Most importantly of all, join the war against atrophy at innerwarstrength.co, and I'll catch you in the next one. Catch you later, guys.